Hi, my name is Jared Miller. I'm currently the Associate International Admissions Director here at Asbury University, as well as the head tennis coach for both the men's and women's Asbury tennis program. I'm here just to talk to you a little bit about the varying differences between the different divisions of small college athletics, how to be involved in small college athletics, what life is like as an athlete in small college athletics. Um, we're going to get started with just kind of talking about the different national organizations for college athletics. And these are the major three. There's a couple of other small ones, but they are normally joined in conjunction with one of these three. The NCAA is the National College Athletics Association. This is probably the one that most people, when you think about college athletics, are familiar with. Within the NCAA, there are three divisions. We also have the NAIA, which is the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. And then you have the NJCCA, which is the National Junior College Athletics Association. In addition to these, you have some smaller athletic associations like the NCCAA, which is the Christian college version of an athletic association for college athletes here in the US. You have some regional ones. The state of California has their own association for junior colleges and community colleges as well for competition. But again, these are the main three. And as we go through this, we're going to primarily focus on the NCAA Division II, NCAA Division III, and NAIA. As those are the topic of this is small college athletics. NCAA Division I are those major college sports that you think of when you think of NCAA basketball and NCAA football and schools like UCLA and Yale and University of North Carolina, Vanderbilt, Baylor. And then you've got a couple smaller schools that will be mixed into there. Some of the regional state schools, Tennessee, Chattanooga, CSU, Bakersfield, things of that nature are still considered Division I, but maybe not quite on the same level as the UCLAs and Yales and so forth. NCAA Division II is more intermediate level academics and athletics. These will be schools like Azusa Pacific, Biola, Palm Beach Atlantic. Other examples, Cedarville. These are schools that are similar to Division I in terms of they still offer athletic scholarships. They're a little bit bigger in terms of size. They may have 4,000 students. So they're kind of medium range schools. In terms of athletic ability, that really kind of depends on the sport. Some sports will be very, can keep up with those lower level Division I schools, and others are they're just kind of intermediate in terms of athletics. NCAA Division III tends to be more academically focused with sports on the side. This level does not offer athletic scholarships. A couple examples of Division III would include Asbury, Wheaton College, Covenant, Calvin. These are just a couple of the Christian schools that are in the U.S. that kind of fall into this category. Other schools would include Gordon and Houghton, George Fox, but other school, I say more academically focused because they also join the ranks of some schools like MIT, Johns Hopkins, Emory, Washington University in St. Louis, these very highly ranked academic institutions that tend to be a little bit smaller. They tend to focus on the academics. They want their students to have a little bit more balance in their life and be able to really, have the best of both worlds in terms of athletics as well as academics. The NAIA tends to be small regional schools. These will be schools like Indiana Wesleyan and Taylor and Westmont. Other NAIA schools include schools like Lindsey Wilson. There's a couple of kind of smaller regional state schools that will be part of the NAIA and then primarily compete within a particular region of the country within their conference. And again, the NJCAA is just the junior and community colleges. They'll have pockets of junior colleges. There's a pocket of them in the South, in Mississippi and Alabama. There's a pocket out in California. And they tend to be extremely regional because they definitely don't cross the entire U.S. There's a lot of junior colleges and community colleges in the U.S., but only a certain number of them actually offer athletics and offer scholarships with athletics as well. We're going to focus on the differences between those middle three categories of Division II, Division III, and then the NAIA. Division II can be private or public universities. Like I said, typically they run somewhere between 3,000 to 6,000 students. They are allowed to offer athletic scholarships, but very few of them are actually fully funded enough to say you have a full ride for athletics. The ones that are will tend to be the ones who rise to the top in terms of national rankings in those sports. But in general, most of these schools will have a set number of athletic scholarships available to them. They'll divide those up, where, in say like Division I, for example, for women, if a school offers, if they're allowed to, for tennis, for example, if they offer 8 full rides, those 8 full scholarships cannot be divided. You either get all or nothing in that particular situation. Where if you don't have the maximum number, you can divide those scholarships up a little bit, and those scholarships become partial. Typically, it's very regional competition. So if you're from, for example, the Indianapolis area, or your school's in the Indianapolis area, most of your conference will be kind of in that Great Lakes area. So it'll be Indiana, Ohio, maybe Michigan, maybe a little bit of Illinois. The schools that are Division II in Georgia, for example, will tend to stick with Georgia. Maybe have a couple schools in Alabama that they'll play. The schools in Florida pretty much only compete against the schools in Florida for their conference. So it does seem to be very regional. And there are about 300 total schools in Division II. So it is a very large category of universities that are represented in Division II. For Division III, this is the largest of all the divisions with 444 schools across the U.S. Scholarships are not provided for athletics. You're not allowed to receive any kind of financial aid for athletics, but aid is awarded for academics, for leadership, and for a variety of other causes. So even though you're not necessarily earning scholarship for athletics, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cost of those schools will be any more expensive than any other school that you go to. It just means that the type of aid that you're receiving is probably a little bit different. The focus for Division III is on the experience of the athlete, and it's not necessarily for the revenue production of the institution. So Division I, of course, you hear a lot about how much their coaches are paid, how much revenue their football team brings in or their basketball team. Well, I can tell you in small college athletics, that's not the discussion. The coaches in this category are certainly not earning in the millions of dollars the way they are in Division I. So the focus really is on the experience of the athlete. It's being able to have that balance. Shorter practice hours. You've got a more condensed season. You're required to have a certain amount of time off in order to make sure you're able to complete your academic work and curriculum. And within this division, I'll mention that, in individual sport athletes such as tennis, swimming, and golf, top players care in these particular sports in particular tend to still look at Division III very seriously in the top schools in Division III because of the quality of academics that those schools offer. So it's pretty common for some of the top tier Division III schools to be able to compete and beat some of those lower level Division I schools. When I think about tennis, and I think about schools like Emory, they have a long-standing history within tennis, and will regularly have 5-star athletes signed for their program in tennis. Even here at Asbury, I think it was 2 years ago, we beat a Division I program in men's tennis. So, like I said, those particular sports, where they tend to be more those individual athletes. They tend to be able to compete still at a fairly high level, even while competing in Division III. For NAIA, I refer to the NAIA a little bit as a wild, wild west of college athletics. You know, athletic scholarships are allowed. There's an absence of a lot of the same rules in the NAIA that exists in the NCAA, and because of that, there's actually some fairly decent competition in the NAIA. So the NCAA tends to have a lot of rules surrounding amateurism. And because the NAIA actually does not have those same requirements and has lower academic requirements required to compete in the NAIA, a lot of those top tier athletes that are not able to compete in the NCAA in Division I and Division II are able to still compete in NAIA and choose to do so. There's about 250 NAIA universities across the U.S. You've got very few of them. There's practically not any of them in New England. You've got a bunch of them kind of in the mid-east, Midwest, the South, in Florida, in Texas, in Nebraska, and there's a bit of a gap. And then there's a whole bunch of them in California. So it also tends to be very regional in terms of competition. They're not hopping on private planes anywhere the way that the University of Kentucky basketball team might do to go play Duke up in New York, as they did earlier this week. There's a couple of differences in terms of being recruited in the different divisions as well. So there's a couple of different ways of points of contact that an athlete and a coach can have. When we talk about non-recruiting material, so any kind of brochure for the university or camps, questionnaires, things that don't have anything necessarily to do with athletics, students are able to receive that at any point in their time as a high school student or athlete. If they're printed specific recruiting materials that have to do with athletics, they're not allowed to receive that in Division II until after July 15th of their sophomore year. Once they're a sophomore, so it's July 15th beginning or after their sophomore year, coaches can begin sending those printed materials to them through the mail or through whatever revenue or avenue is the most acceptable. In terms of telephone calls, again, that June 15th date after the athlete's sophomore year is really important. A lot happens after that June 15th date of sophomore year. You're able to start receiving phone calls from coaches, printed materials. You can have off-campus contact. So like if you're competing somewhere, coaches can come and can watch you play, and then when you complete your competition, they can actually interact with you once that competition is completed. At any point, you can have unofficial visits. An unofficial visit is it's a visit to the campus and to the school, being paid for by you or your own family, where the university itself is not reimbursing you for anything, whether it's for food or for travel expenses or anything along those lines. An official visit is when you've been formally invited to visit a school by the coach and they're reimbursing you for some of your expenses. Those can't start happening until after June 15th of your sophomore year as well. In Division III, these are a little bit more relaxed than Division I and Division II. You can kind of the same with Division II. Recruiting materials can really happen kind of at any time. Telephone calls, there's no limit. Digital communications. The main thing with digital communications is there's no limit in how that happens until you get involved with social media. There's some specific rules in terms of the publicity of social media, what coaches can and cannot say, how they respond to you, what they can post on social media. So within Division III, there are some rules there. Off-campus contact can't happen until after the athlete's sophomore year, and official visits can't happen until January 1st of their junior year in Division III. Unofficial visits, much like Division II, can happen at any time and can happen as much as the student chooses to do in terms of visiting the campus. For NAI, the only real major recruiting rule or timeline that exists for coaches in terms of recruiting is that they cannot recruit a committed or student who is already playing for an institution without that student being released up from their commitment by that institution. So in order for that to happen, the student just has to go to their athletic director, ask for the release to be sent to the other coach. And once that release is received, at that point, that student is free to really speak to whoever they would like to. In terms of eligibility for Division II does have the NCAA clearinghouse, much like Division I. There are some core course requirements for Division II. These are courses that you have to take while you're in high school in order to be considered eligible for Division II. If you are considering this as an international student and you don't currently attend an international school, I would seriously consider taking a really good look at these core courses because a lot of these core courses may or may not be taught automatically by foreign secondary schools. We've run into this issue quite a bit, particularly in some places like Ireland and England, where it's more the Cambridge type curriculum. Where you kind of focus really just kind of on 4 or 5 core subjects. If you miss one of these core courses and you're not focusing on one of them and you miss it, then you're not going to be proven to be eligible in Division I or Division II. You also have to maintain a core course GPA. And that used to be on a sliding scale, but recently the ACT and SAT requirement has been suspended. So it used to be the higher the GPA you had, the lower the ACT or SAT score you needed. The lower your GPA was, the higher your SAT or ACT score needed to be in order to be eligible. But like I said, currently the ACT and SAT are suspended by the NCAA as a requirement due to COVID-19. There's still some questions in terms of whether that will return as a requirement in the future. One note with the NCAA, and this is really both with Division II and Division III both, even though the NCAA clearinghouse may not require the ACT or the SAT, that does not mean that the individual conferences that those schools compete in can't. So individual conferences have their own set of eligibility standards that are usually cleared by the schools themselves. A conference may say, as a freshman athlete, you have to have had a 3.0 GPA and a 24 ACT score in order to compete. That's not an NCAA standard, but that might be a standard within the conference that your chosen school is competing in. So this is an important question to ask. It's not just, am I eligible for the NCAA, but am I also eligible to compete within your conference if that conference has a separate set of rules? Not all conferences have their own separate set of rules for this. Some of them, the large majority of them, follow the NCAA guidelines, but it is not out of scope for a conference to have their own set of standards for their student athletes from the schools in this for the schools in their conference. This would especially be true if you have a collection of schools that tend to be the more elite athletic or academics. So you might find this, for example, in the Ivy League, or some of the upper echelon Division III schools. The University Athletics, or I think it's University Athletic Association, is one of those schools that has like Washington University, St. Louis, and Emory and Case Western, all in the same conference. So definitely keep an eye out for that, and make sure you ask those questions of the coach when you have the opportunity to speak with them in terms of what you need in order to be eligible. For Division III, there's no NCAA clearinghouse, and in general, those eligibility requirements are set by the institution's minimum requirements for admittance and good standing and maintaining good standing in the university. Division III tends to have slightly higher minimum standards in terms of being admitted. They tend to have some fairly more competitive schools compared to Division II and the NAI when it comes to being admitted into the universities. So the NCAA has basically said your admittance requirements are going to be higher than what we would require anyway. So they've left that really up to the universities themselves to make that determination. But again, this is another place where if you can talk to the university about getting in and things along those lines. But if you still want to check to make sure that the conference that they're in does not have their own set of standards. So like I said, that's definitely keep asking questions. In the NAI does have its own eligibility center and clearinghouse. Their minimum is a 2.0 GPA on the 4.0 American scale. They also, much like the NCAA, used to have an ACT or an SAT requirement. That is currently suspended the same way that the NCAA has suspended their requirement. And again, there's no real inclination or decision on whether that will be returning in the future. There's that discussion on the effectiveness on test scores is an ongoing conversation in higher education in general. Recently, Asbury had the College Tour come and visit our campus. I have a small segment from one of our student athletes just kind of talking about her experience as being an athlete at a small college. So we have Alex Boylan first initially. This is just a short kind of 3-minute clip. Alex Boylan is going to introduce Bethany from the Asbury volleyball team. And she's just going to talk a little bit about her experience, what she was looking for when she was going through the recruitment process, and what she ended up with now as a senior, now kind of following the final project of going through 3.5 years of and we're going to try this again. Is that better?
All right, everyone, let's head up the hill to the Luce Physical Activity Center and home of Asbury Athletics. Student athletes represent 1/3 of the student body and compete in 16 sports, including cheerleading. Let's meet one of these 360 student athletes, 2-time captain of the volleyball team, senior Bethany. Bethany is competing athletically on Team AU while also getting a world-class education. And as a part of NCAA Division III, these athletes are getting quality athletic experiences while also creating margin to be a true student athlete. Bethany, the court is all yours.
Thanks, Alex. Since childhood, sports and a team player identity have been an integral part of my life. When it came to choosing a college, I knew that I wanted to play volleyball and attend a smaller university where I would be personally known. Asbury was the perfect fit for what I loved and wanted to pursue. I feel blessed to be able to compete and represent Christ and Asbury through volleyball. Being an Asbury Eagle has given me a community like none other. On the court and off, leadership is a big part of my story. I represented athletics in Asbury Student Congress, served as the president of the Student Athlete Athletic Advisory Committee, and been voted a captain for 2 years on the volleyball team. Volleyball at Asbury has also given me the opportunity to give back. In 2019, I fell in love with Puerto Rico on our team's mission trip and came back to serve people again 2 years later. I credit Asbury Athletics for these amazing opportunities and am so grateful for the deeply impactful connections that I have made here. Being a part of Team AU means being a part of a family. There's never been a moment where I haven't felt known by the faculty or other student athletes. This program is about developing team players who embody the light of Christ through their actions on the court and off. Also, athletics is entering into the NCAA Division III, and I am ecstatic for our program, faculty, and athletes to compete and represent Christ for a new audience. Asbury Athletics has blessed me with the amazing opportunities to develop my work ethic, communication, time management, and leadership skills, in addition to empowering me to humbly walk with Christ in my next steps after Asbury. Back to you, Alex.
Bethany, what a shining example of using your talents, abilities, and leadership, all for the glory of Christ. It's inspiring to hear your story and how Asbury Athletics has shepherded a love of serving all over the world. Thanks again, Bethany, and good luck to the Volleyball Eagles and all Team AU this year.
So the point in kind of showing that video is the idea of the small college athletic experience is truly about the athlete, and it's about growing the athlete, not just in their athletic ability, but in their leadership skills at a Christian college, in their love for Christ, their ability to serve others, their ability to see the world and to succeed in academics as well as in their athletic career here. This would be true probably at any Christian college in the US, or really any small college in the US. As I mentioned before, we as coaches are not receiving those giant bonuses that you hear about in the news for the major athletic programs. We are here for our students. We are here to shepherd them. We are here to guide them. We're here to help them grow, not just athletically, but academically, socially, professionally, and that will continue for well past their time here. After they graduate. That's the kind of personal experience and the personal care that you'll receive being coached by a coach in small college athletics. This is a great time for any questions. As I mentioned before, each level has different requirements, different level, and this leads to a different experience for different people. Some levels have greater athletic ability, some allow for more balance, and others have great academics. The real question that you've got to ask for yourself as you're going through this process is, what is the experience that you're looking for, or what that you're searching for yourself? Are you looking for someone to shepherd you? Are you looking for pure athletics? Are you looking for a great combination and balance? Any questions?
Jared, I have a couple here.
Okay.
One of them, I'm not sure with the international audience how true this statement is, so this is really more of my ignorance, and I apologize for that, but what's your thoughts on paid recruiting services out there to help specifically the international student walk through the process?
So some of the, I would say, if you're going to use a paid recruiting service as an international student, I would make sure that you do your research on who that organization is. I would say, I've been in contact with a lot of these organizations. There's good ones and there's some really bad ones. There's one that works primarily in Central and South America, where essentially what happens is they keep a database of coaches' email addresses. They send out one email. The student basically pays the organization. That organization sends out one email. The responses from coaches go directly back to the student, and the organization from that point forward is no longer involved. That's a horrible way to go about it. It's really not matching up, what the student is wanting. The number of emails that I get on a daily basis from students who are looking for programs that we don't have, is pure insanity. And a lot of that comes from those paid organizations like that, where they're not, they've got everything set up to be done in bulk. They're not caring about the individual piece. There's some really great ones. University USP, that's based out of Florida, is one that I've worked with a lot and has really a great reputation. I've attended several of their showcases in the past. It's really well run. They really care for the students that they're working with. Each student has an individual advisor that they're working with who's working on their behalf. It really depends on the individual organization. Like I said, there's good ones, there's bad ones. Most athletes, especially in some of these smaller countries, all the athletes know each other. So in general, it should be pretty easy to find someone who's had an experience with whatever organization you're looking for. But I would definitely say, don't look at just the numbers that the organization is providing for you. Find someone who's tried to work with them in the past to get their experience from them. So even if that experience sometimes has led to a connection, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a good experience for the student athlete. If you're going to pay that kind of money, they really should be carrying a fairly decent workload for you.
That's some really good advice, because of course not every service is created equal. And yeah, don't listen to the sales pitch. Do your own homework. Find the fit. Find a former teammate who made that journey successfully prior to you. Somebody can maybe give you some advice on that. You want to talk about a free ride? I think it's always important to kind of set the expectation of how likely is that. And I know you talked about the various divisions, but I think talking about just kind of setting a realistic expectation, I think everybody thinks, they're a star athlete, or their parents think they're the star athlete, right? And obviously, even if you are awarded a free ride, I think it's maybe important to mention that really covers direct cost. And as an international student, you certainly have a lot of indirect costs that you should certainly at least be thinking about and budgeting for. So do you want to address maybe both of those topics?
Yeah. So to make a long story short, if you're a male athlete, the chances of you receiving a full ride are very small. The chances are, unless you are a top tier athlete, on the worldwide stage, and you are going after a fully funded athletic program that has, the maximum number of available scholarships, you're going to pay something. It may not be significant, hugely significant, but what you'll find is a lot of, for Division I in particular, where they do a lot of this partial funding of scholarships, you'll hear it being said a lot in terms of percentages. Well, I have a 70% scholarship, I have an 80%, I have a full ride. And when you're talking about direct costs, direct costs are tuition, room, board, student fees, sometimes health insurance. Not all schools cover health insurance. Health insurance can be a fairly significant cost for an international student. And it's something your F1 visa requires you to have. So like I said, on the women's side, if you're fairly decent, there's a better chance of receiving a full ride on the women's side than on the men. This is just the impact of American football on college athletics. So like I said, there, but again, that really is kind of about those athletic programs that are fully funded for scholarships. How a school decides to spend their money is, it changes with each school. There are some schools that will, when it comes to athletics, will not give out very much in terms of athletic scholarship, but they'll fund their operations budget really, really well. For those students, they get really great trips. They may go to Florida for a week over spring break. They may get great gear. They may have shoes and every imaginable piece of article of clothing you can imagine. Other schools, may fully fund their scholarships, but their operations budget is minimal. So they may not have to pay for anything in terms of tuition in school, but they're not quite getting the same experience necessarily as someone who is paying a little bit more. So it's really important to ask those questions of, okay, how, what does your season look like? What am I responsible for? What I'm not responsible for? I know on my team likes to take that really nice spring break trip. Where we'll go to Hilton Head Island, or we'll go to Orlando or something along those lines. And we kind of do a trade-off where, say it's like, okay, we'll do a big trip like that, But you guys are responsible for getting your own shoes. We can't cover both. I can help you get shoes at a discount, but you guys still have to pay for your own shoes. And 9 times out of 10, they would rather have the experience than they would rather have the trip. So like I said, be careful about, and ask those questions about full rides, about partial scholarships. If you have a scholarship that covers part of your room and board, for example, if you are on a campus that allows you to live off campus as you get older, you might be able to, that partial scholarship for room and board might cover all of your room and board when you live off campus. Depends on how many people you live with when you move off campus. So and I would certainly especially ask that question of, what are the requirements for me to maintain the scholarship? What could cause me to lose this money? If I get hurt, what happens? If I get hurt and can no longer compete, what happens in that case? If I have a bad semester academically and I'm not eligible, what happens in that situation? Are you offering me any scholar, for Division III, for example, where there's no athletic scholarships? Are any of the scholarships that you're offering me only good for my freshman year? There are schools out there who will give freshman year only scholarships. The details, the fine print is in the details, or however that saying goes. But unless you know to look for those situations, you could end up causing yourself a little bit of heartache in the long run. But the rule of thumb is have, when you talk to a coach, before you start that process, have a conversation with your family, have a conversation with your parents, have an idea of what your budget is for your education on an annual basis. Coaches will, if a student walked up to me right now and said, I only have $4,000 per year for my budget, I know as a coach at Asbury, that's not possible here. So those conversations that can help you get through some schools really fast without getting too far in depth and wasting a bunch of time. But like I said, have that in the back of your head. And there's some instances where you may get a full ride, but you hate the school. It might be worth it to you to pay a little bit to gain a better experience.
With travel so limited right now, what is the best way to get to know a team, a coach, a style of play, whatever, long distance?
Yeah, so for international students, for tennis, I know, YouTube videos and videos have always been a huge thing. I would say, have a video that shows a little bit of everything. Don't put music on it. If you are playing tennis in a video, I want to hear the sound as the ball comes off of your strings. And when you put music on there, it covers that for me and I can't hear it. And that's important for me to understand. Have a little bit of everything. Show your technique, show where the ball goes, have match point play, or game play. Some sports, I would assume, for tennis, for example, it's pretty common in tennis videos to have someone just standing there hitting forehands. I would imagine for basketball, having someone just stand at the top of key unguarded, shooting baskets is pretty useless. Because in basketball you're guarded, 90% of the time. So having gameplay that's unedited, we don't want to only see your good side. We need to know the ugly side too, because that's how we know how to be prepared for who you are. If I have a player, for example, who clearly favors one wing over the other, that has an impact on where I start them out in terms of trying to find chemistry for a doubles team. But if you hide from me that you don't have the confidence in your backhand that you do in your forehand, then, you know, I'm wasting time at the beginning of practice having to figure that out. You know, so I would say video is a great way. I've been doing a lot of, and I know how tired people are of Zoom, but I've actually had some fairly decent success with it, where I've had scheduled sessions on Zoom, where I would send out an email telling them how to sign up for the session. The day before the session, if they've signed up, I send out the Zoom link to them. On the session, they get to talk to a faculty member. They get to talk to a current student. You know, we talk about everything Asbury tennis. They have the opportunity to ask questions that usually last about an hour. You know, but so far, I've done this twice for the men and twice for the women this semester, and both times have been really productive, and really useful to both parties. You know, so I would say if you have the opportunity to do something like that, I would. I know might feel weird to be on a call with other people, but the great thing about that is they may ask questions that you don't think of. You know, so you know, and you're meeting other people who are also considering the same school and the same team. You know, so you can get an idea a little bit of the type of people that the coach recruits. You know, so like I said, you know, it is very, very tough right now. But the truth is for a lot of international students, unless you're on the Division I level and the school's been paying for your official visit, this method of recruiting has been going on this way for years. So
what about as an athlete trying to get a feel for you as a coach or your team? I mean, do you ever do Zoom practices, or, you know, where it's truly a more, you know, things that you could experience in person if it wasn't COVID or I wasn't an international student?
Well, you know, I give them the opportunity to ask questions of a student. You know, if they want to meet one of our students, I gladly set that up for them. If you find a coach is hiding their athletes from them, you know, because the truth is for most athletes, they have an interest in who is potentially joining their team. You know, very rarely will I go to a student and go, hey, I've got a potential student who wants to talk to someone from our team. Are you willing to do it? Very rarely does it happen. There be like, no, absolutely not. Because that student of ours wants to know who might be coming in, what kind of personality they is. You know, it's pretty common after they meet with me too, because as much as the student and you guys are judging us, you know, we're making those same judgments on whether you guys are a good fit for us, as much as you guys are making a judgment whether we're a good fit for you. You know, that judgment goes both directions. You know, so I know for me, you know, the indoor facility that we practice at has a live web stream 24/7. You know, so if a student was interested in that, I could give them access to be able to see. They wouldn't be able to hear anything necessarily, but they would actually be able to see kind of how a general practice goes through and kind of the flow of that. You know, depending on the sport, you know, there's a lot of live streaming of matches and games, and you know, for basketball and volleyball and soccer. You're probably not going to find that for things like cross country or golf. You know, but like I said, you know, most things have found a way to show up online somehow. You know, so like I said, you know, you know, if a student really wants it and that coach really wants that student, they'll find some kind of balance to even if they can't get it fully how the student wants it, they'll work to at least give it a shot. You know, see if there's a roundabout way to give them some kind of idea.
Yep. So you mentioned on a few different slides the rules that basically govern how early a coach can contact you, in what ways, and how that evolves over time. And that obviously varies by division. But is there any reason why an athlete should not contact a program or a coach, even if it's before that, understanding that they literally cannot get a response.
Yeah.
But is there any advice to or not to do that?
There's no reason not to do it. I mean, especially those bigger, more popular programs, recruiting for those programs starts early sophomore, junior year. Coaches are looking, they may not be able to talk to the freshmen, but they're certainly looking at some of those freshmen. And especially if there's a connection to that school already. One quick story I'll give is, we were part of the NAIA many years ago, or actually as recently as last year. We just switched to Division III this year. But I had a group of 7 guys coming in, and 3 of them were from the local high school. And their senior year, they had, here in Kentucky at that point, 5th graders could play high school tennis. And there was a little guy who was a 5th grader. And we were doing a signing for one of the seniors. And that little 5th grader walks up to me with every bit of confidence he could possibly have in his 4-foot frame, and tells me that he wants to come play tennis for me at Asbury. And jokingly, I mentioned to him, I was like, deal, but we're going to wait until you're at least in the 8th grade to sign. Well, that little 5th grader ended up actually, oddly enough, being a TCK, and in his 8th grade year ended up living in Singapore. And I got a Facebook message from him when he was an 8th grader, reminding me that he was in 8th grade and was ready to sign, and he's a current senior for me now. So those little comments, when as a coach that there's potential, that there's no, at that point there's no such thing as effort wasted. If I had a kid that I couldn't talk to as a freshman, send me a message, by that kid's sophomore year or junior year, if he contacted me again, I'm going to remember that situation. I'm going to remember that contact freshman year, and I'm going to remember how long he's been waiting to be able to talk to me. So like I said, in a world where coaches end up sending a lot of unreturned emails and a lot of unreturned texts and a lot of unreturned phone calls, that kind of situation is like gold. Because we at least send a message knowing there's a little bit of hope.
Absolutely. Well, I think just one parting question.
Yeah.
If someone is kind of new to this idea of, I can play college athletics, where should they start? What should be maybe their first 2 or 3 steps to this process? Again, knowing that the sport varies, the division varies, their current age and when they have this realization probably varies, but just where's a good place to start?
Probably with a college counselor. Most college counselors at an American school or an international school have probably had someone who has gone on to do some kind of level of college athletics. That's always a great resource. Those college counselors typically have a connection to the NCAA or NAIA as well, because they've been having to send transcripts, to those organizations to verify eligibility. I would say, if they're interested, if they have a particular school that they're interested in, if there's, if they've kind of always gone through life going, man, I really hope one day I can attend Hope College in Holland, Michigan. If that's always been a dream for theirs, there's really no reason not to reach out to their coach, especially in small college athletics. I make the joke that a small college coach will talk to anybody who's willing to talk to them back. No matter the level, because you never know as a small college coach exactly what the future looks like and what that holds in for your team. You can hope, you can plan, but with especially Division III, for example, without scholarships to really entice students to come your direction, you could even run into a situation where you've got a tennis player who wants to attend your school but just doesn't want to play tennis. And that's heartbreaking as a coach. To have a great tennis player. I would also say, I say this quite a bit for tennis, is part of my job is to be an ambassador for the sport. For tennis in particular, there tends to be a gap where between senior year of high school and when students graduate university, where people stop playing tennis, and then they 4 or 5 years down the road, they remember that they used to play, and then they try to find rekindle this passion. Well, I have a no cut policy on my team, specifically because my job is to help make sure that link is not cut. Even if it's adapted where they're not they're not practicing necessarily 5 days a week the way that most of my varsity would, and it's just 2 or 3 days a week, I would still rather have them be part of my program for 2 or 3 days a week than not at all. Because at least at that point, they're still part of the sport. I've had some of my best leaders on my team have been some of my worst players. So everyone is capable of fulfilling some kind of role on a team. That's the point of a team. So I would say, regardless of ability, if you've got a passion for a sport in school, reach out to that coach. And if that coach doesn't share your passion or doesn't see your passion in it, then quite honestly, that it's just not the coach for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing. It's not a personal hit. I'll use this as an example as well. I'm not a yeller. I'm not the coach that's gonna scream at you. My kids actually say I'm a lot more scary when I'm quiet. But there are players who genuinely feel like they need a coach who will yell at them to bring the best out of them. And I'll tell players all the time, I'm like, look, if you're that kind of player, I'm not the coach for you. It's not a hit on me, it's not a hit on the player. It's just an adaptability thing and a place where those two people just don't mesh well to create the optimal situation for the athlete. In the same way a Christian school may not be for everybody. That's a common conversation I have a lot. We're not going to apologize for being who we are, as a Christian university. I'm in having a conversation, I'm not going to ask you to apologize for not liking the fact that we're a Christian university. There are just certain situations that are, people are different. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, that's all the questions that came in that I had. So again, I thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And hopefully we continue these conversations and hopefully it just gives people some confidence to pursue their dreams and not feel like they have to give up one or the other, that they really could find a program that fits them and allows them to pursue their passion for their sport.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.